Between. He's the star, Richard Bazzi from Schultz Ford at schultzford.com. I am Bubba from 100.7 Star. And boy, do we have a star with us today. Julia Landauer is with us. Welcome to Cars, Stars, and everything in between. Boy, I don't even know where we're going to start with you, Julia.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Julia, this is Richard. Before we started, you and I were having a little bit of an offline conversation. And that brings up so many questions because I love racing, first of all.
Me too.
So I know you do, and you're really pretty damn good at it. But not that it matters because everybody talks about a prior life. I actually attended the Jim Russell's British School of Motor Racing.
Oh, cool.
But that was so many years ago. It was when Riverside Raceway was there in Southern California. I did that. I kept going. I bought all this stuff. I bought the fire suit. I bought it all.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think I'm a car dealer, so I've always had the passion for vehicles and racing. But I found, even when I did that long ago, there was a point where I didn't have the nerve to keep going, where I hit a speed that was really my top. And so I figured I'd probably never go very far in it because I did have a top end.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any fear ever?
That's such a great question. And it's one that I think I was answering incorrectly for a really long time because I always thought, well, I must not be scared or I must be fearless. People told me I was fearless, especially being a teenager, especially a teenage girl in racing cars. But then I realized just like everyone else, I do totally get scared. It's scary to go 185, 195 miles an hour. It's scary to be within inches of a wall. It's scary to, put all of your effort into a career where very few people are really successful in it. There's a whole lot. But what I found was that the drive that I had, the emotion that I have, how much I loved winning, how much I loved working with a team and the collaborative aspect of that, all of that was more important than the fear. And if you think about it, what I've realized recently is that in go-karting, right, you get into a go-kart, it's scary, it's fast, you're a 10-year-old kid, whatever. You pragmatically work through it, you master that go-kart, and then you move up to the junior level. And so it's another cycle of being scared of going faster, working through it pragmatically, and then mastering it. So I feel quite lucky that by nature of racing and continuing on this competitive journey for so long, like it was just a repetition of being scared and working through it. And I think that really helped in life as well.
Now, Julia, while I understand and I agree with that 100%, I have a personal friend of mine and my wife's who at one time held the land speed record in drag racing.
Oh, wow.
Her name is Danielle. Her maiden name, I think, was Danielle DePorter. And at one time, she was the fastest, right, that had ever done it, ever in the history ever. She's a friend of ours, and her career ended with a crash. She's well now, but it was a very scary ending to her career. But knowing her the way I know her, there is a different level of drive to the person like yourself than somebody like Richard or I that really has a drive towards business. How can you define the difference? Because you're doing a lot of public speaking now, because if there's a different level of get to it with what you did in racing than there is in, let's say, the business world.
That's a great question. I've been asked a lot of questions in my life, and I'm not sure I've ever gotten that kind of question specifically, because while I agree with you that it is slightly different in terms of what we're going after, and I think athletics in general are a different type of pushing through fear than going into business. There's more of a blueprint for business, I think, than there is for any kind of sports, and especially in racing because it's so financially dependent. There are high barriers to entry. But I'm going to push back and say that I think that when it comes to your mindset of, okay, when you're approached with something that's scary, do you decide, okay, I'm going to dive into it, I'm going to work my way through it, and I know that I'll get through it, or do you tend to shy away? And I think you can build up to the former of wanting to dive into it. But I think so much of that, I think for me at least, was in childhood, my parents, encouraging us like, you will be okay, you will get through this, try it. And I think learning how to fall down and get back up, whether that's physically, I think racing is really scary until you crash the first time. And then you're like, okay, that sucked. But for the most part, you get up and walk away, especially in NASCAR, it's super safe. And like in business, like you have to look at your own cost benefit analysis, and maybe some things are too financially risky to jump into. Maybe they're not. So I still kind of think it's a similar mindset.
I do too. I really do. But I want to go back to something that Bubba just said, and talking about a drag racer. Now, to me, that's not racing. I don't like it. It's boring to me. I can't watch it. It's nothing to me. Now, as a Ford dealer, I'm really close with a guy named Bob Tasca III, who is, Tasca Racing. They use dragsters. He races dragsters. I feel like that's a totally different type of racing, because you're really not. I don't know. You're competing with one person. You're competing with speed. You're really only competing with yourself, in my opinion. But when you race, and your approach, as you defined it, is much more, I want to say, intellectual. And I'm not just saying that because I know you graduated from Stanford, but
a little nerdy over here. Yeah.
but analytical, because, as you said, you laid it out. You hit one level, whether it's go-karts, whatever it is, one level, you figure out the pragmatical aspect of it. And then you conquer that, and then you moved on. I don't think most people have that ability to break it down like that. I think a lot of it is emotion. And for me, it was all emotion. It was all adrenaline, emotion. And I mean, I didn't ever sit down and think, wow, you know what, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. And I think that gave you and gives you still a great edge to be able to compartmentalize it like that and move forward.
Thank you. It's interesting, because someone had actually asked me this in an interview, like probably 6 years ago or something at this point, because they had talked with an MLB player who also went to a competitive college, and they asked him, do you think being overly analytical or academic about your approach is a good or a bad thing? And he said it actually sometimes was a bad thing, because he felt like he overthought some things. And I definitely get that. I also wonder how much, and there are so few examples of women in racing, a lot more now, but like there are biological differences. So does like less testosterone mean that I do more of an intellectual or mental approach? I don't know, because again, there aren't a ton of examples, but I think that could play into it. But to your point, it's still emotional. There's still a high being in the car. There's the adrenaline, being in the zone when things are just operating on almost a subconscious level because you've mastered it. I mean, it's so cool. I have yet to find another activity that's like that, and it's awesome.
What's the longest race you were in?
I think the longest races were my Xfinity races that I did, NASCAR Xfinity races that I did in 2022, which were 2.5-ish hours.
Wow.
Which is a long race.
Yes!
It's a long race.
I can't imagine how exhausted you are.
It is really tiring. And it's for anyone who doesn't know, like in a stock car in NASCAR, the motors are right up front. We don't have air conditioning. We have some cooling, but for the most part, it's a sauna in there. So we're fully suited up in our fire resistant gear and our helmet. We're strapped really tightly in. It's super hot. It can be 155 degrees in the car. And we're having to make these really accurate and precise split-second decisions at very high speeds for 2.5 hours. So it's such an interesting endurance marathon kind of sport, I think. And then you also have to deal with the equipment changing, the tires, that you burn off rubber, you burn off fuel. And so then the weight distribution changes, and how you drive the car changes over the course of a race. So it's just, you have to be so smart and managing so many different inputs as you're driving. And it's exhausting mentally and physically. And I was talking with Ryan Blaney on my podcast about this, that for him, like some of the cup racing stuff is just mentally makes it so much more tiring than the physical element, even though physically it's hard.
More with Julia Landauer when we return with cars, stars, and everything in between. Stand by.
You're wonderful.
Oh, thank you. You guys are wonderful.
That was the fastest 9 minutes, because we have 2 9-minute segments. That was the fastest 9-minute segment we've ever done, ever.
You said that last week.
I'm not special.
No, I didn't. I can tell you I didn't.
Yeah, it's super. I love the sport so much.
I'm just saving this one. Wow, unbelievable. That's so awesome. All right, here we go.
We all got our big old water bottles.
I'm ready. I'm ready to get back in. I want to race.
You should.
I want to race.
Me too.
I'm just saving it. Then we'll start all over. We'll start. This will be the
Julian,
second.
you have a problem. There's an obstacle between you and I.
What's that?
You didn't race Fords.
I did 1 year.
1 year? I didn't see that. I saw Chevy.
2017 in what was the K&N West Series. Sunrise Ford was my team.
Sunrise Ford from California?
Yeah. I will be honest, it was not our best season. Me and my teammate, there was something, I don't know. I went from having, I think I was 4th the year before in points on a Toyota team that I was the last driver added. And I switched teams for financial reasons, and it was a tough season, not going to lie.
Yeah, I didn't see that, but
yeah.
Yes, we have to get you back in a Ford.
Oh, if you ever want to get me back in a Ford, you let me know. I'll do it in a heartbeat.
Well, make sure we exchange contact info.
Will do.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple people in Fords right now from Ford Motor Company, not me personally.
Yeah.
But and then I am really good friends with Riley Herbst's uncle.
Oh, okay. So he was my teammate the year before when I got 4th. Sorry,
Really?
let us know if we have to come in. Yeah, so I think I got 4th on team. I think he was 5th or 7th. But yeah,
He won. I think he won in Las Vegas. His first one
last year. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Taping the second and final break. Here we go. 100.1 FM, AM 1020 KDK. This is Car Stars and everything in between. He's the star, Richard Bazzi. I'm Bubba from 100.7 Star. And Julia Landauer is a 2-time champion race car driver from New York City. You made history as the first and youngest female champion in the Skip Barber Racing Series at the age of 14. That's nuts.
It was wild. And let me tell you, it was really cool to be this like little kid finally going through puberty that was like dealing with middle school in New York City, which was a little rough. And then to have this outlet of going to the racetrack and absolutely obliterating all the competition, which happened to be like older guys. I say older, they're probably in their 20s and 30s. But I was like, it was a huge confidence boost that I'm very lucky I got.
And you're on the TV show Survivor?
I was. Let me tell you, learned I'm not great for reality TV. But that being said, it was a really cool experience, very authentic, super challenging. Fun is not the word I would use because it's so hard, and I'm very vocal about this, that I'm forever bitter that it was fans versus favorites because it's half returning people and half new players. And
who won that season?
John Cochran, and he roasted me in the episode I was voted out, which hurt my feelings so much because we were 2 nerds uniting, and
That's funny.
I got backstabbed.
That's funny. How did you get involved in racing? Did your father have an interest in it? Where did it all start?
Both my parents were looking for an activity for me and my 2 younger siblings, and they wanted something that was competitive. They wanted something where we could all stay together as a family and do it together. And they loved that it was co-ed, and they loved that their girls would be able to compete head-to-head with boys, since we have to do that in the real world also. And I loved it. I was great at it. I loved going fast. I loved the camaraderie of the racetrack, and we worked together as a non-racing family. My parents are 2 professionals from New York City, right? But we went to Oakland Valley Race Park, which is where Marco Andretti raced for a little bit, and it's in upstate-ish New York. And yeah, then we just kind of did a lot of research and went the Formula car route initially with Skip Barber, which was great. And then when I was 16, switched over to oval racing with Ford Focus Midgets, another Ford that I raced, and I forgot about that, Ford Focus Midgets with Bob East. And then I did part-time late model stuff. I went to college, raced part-time. When I graduated, was racing in a weekly NASCAR series, won the track championship there, and then climbed through the minor leagues of NASCAR, making it up to Xfinity in 2022.
Wow.
So there is a path.
There is a path, yeah.
And can you summarize that path? Like if somebody said, I really love to race, you're in Charlotte right now, I think, right? And I think Ford Performance, we have a racing school there, right? And so like my son really wants to do it, and he says he wants to race. So if he wanted to do this, hypothetically, what would that path be? Would he come and do something like that? And then what?
Yeah, so if you're looking at the NASCAR route specifically, there are a handful of different options. You're seeing a lot of guys at the top level, whether Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, they do a lot of dirt racing. I'll be honest, I'm less familiar with the midgets and sprint cars and everything. But if you want to stick with pavement, people at the very early level do Legends cars, Bandoleros, and then you can get into late model stock, super late models, and they're at the short tracks around the country. And there are different driving schools you can go to, different development teams. And then from there, the trajectory is kind of ARCA West and East, the ARCA series, which is owned by NASCAR Truck Series. NASCAR Regional is the newly branded kind of grassroots level racing that's NASCAR. And then I've also raced in the Canadian NASCAR Series. I've raced in the European NASCAR Series, which I've been the highest finishing American in that series, which I was really proud of.
Which is awesome.
Thank you.
But it sounds like also you've leapfrogged a lot of that. And
I did.
Because you were really good at it. So talent trumps everything again, right?
Talent's really important. And part of the leapfrogging was full transparency, where funding was and where I could get sponsorship or where I could, do other initiatives that I got the funding to do to then go racing. Because it is an expensive sport. You have to pay for the equipment and the teams, and it's just, there is that element that can't be ignored. But luckily, I've been able to prove that I can be competitive in a lot of different types of cars.
Was being a female an aid or an obstacle in obtaining funding?
It's so interesting because I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, each accomplishment was amplified, I think. Every year someone wins a late model championship, right? And when I did it as a female, it got a lot of notoriety. Also, when you don't have a good result, you can easily get pegged as, oh, she's a woman racing. When it comes to sponsorship, I think it's hard regardless. I think it's challenging, but some people have said that they think it's actually harder for women to get sponsorship because there are so few examples of women winning at the highest levels that maybe a sponsor doesn't necessarily want to take that chance. I don't know that to be true. I think a lot of people I respect have felt that, and there have been some articles written by motorsports outlets that kind of talk about that. So I think it goes both ways, but I will say it's tough. I think it's always tough to be the quote unquote other in an otherwise dominated industry, whether it's a woman in a male dominated industry. There are a lot of great things. I've had a lot of incredible male allies, which I'm so grateful for, and who have really helped me and stood up for me. But there's definitely some tough elements about it, I think.
Yeah, I would go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, obviously, Danica Patrick. Did she help? Because you guys were around kind of the same time, but she was a little bit before you, correct?
Yeah, she's about 10 years before me.
Yeah. Did she open up a lot of doorways, or did she have any? I assume she did.
I think she normalized, women being involved in racing. Right. I think, even when I was racing, when I won my late model championship in 2015, after she had been there for a while, when I was in Victory Lane, there were kids who were so surprised to see a woman in Victory Lane because they just didn't know that women could race. So there was still that cultural element. So I think she really helped normalize that women could be there. But I think it's an interesting question because since her, there have been very few women who have been able to get the support to go further and further. And there are some, and there's Haley Deegan, and, and I think that's great. And there's a lot in the Formula car stuff on the European side, but people like, my peers who I thought were super talented, Joanna Long and Kenzie Rustin, like really competitive women who didn't quite make it. So I think it's hard to answer that question when we don't have tangible results to look on, but definitely a positive.
When you go out and give your motivational speeches, what is usually the speeches about? Is it about your career and how to overcome these obstacles?
Yeah. So I gave a TEDx talk when I was at Stanford called "Can Nice Girls Win Races?" And I talked about some stereotypes that I felt were not fair through personal storytelling. And so I've developed that into general motivation is my category. And so I tell entertaining, vulnerable, really honest stories about things like taking ownership, about authenticity, teamwork, leadership, communication, and it's all rooted in my life experiences. And I try to deliver them in a way that I would talk to my friend. So, I'm honest, I'm no BS, and I try to articulate it in a way that's entertaining for the audience.
Well, you're pretty special. I'll tell you. You mentioned that you're interested in returning to racing. Is that reality?
You know, I'm always open to racing. I love racing. I hope to be able to do it. The way I've described it is that I've shifted away from spending all of my time sponsorship hunting. It's so tough and grueling, and got to the point where I wanted my hard work to result in something a little more tangible that I could celebrate. And so I would love to continue to get behind the wheel. And I just don't know that I'll make it to the cup level at this point.
Julia, if people want to follow you, if they want to see more about you, where can they go to, even if they wanted to book you for one of your motivational speeches, how can they find you?
Yeah, well, thank you for that plug so much. I appreciate it. At Julia Landauer, JuliaLandauer, across social media, or julialandauer.com. Lots of information on my podcast called If I'm Honest with Julia Landauer, speaking, racing, all that fun stuff.
Julia, thank you. You're amazing. You really are. Richard may be the best guest we've ever had.
There's no question. So organic.
Thank
so
you.
real. Love it.
You guys made it easy. Thank you.